I always believed that trust was the foundation of a strong marriage. My wife, Sana, and I had built our life around honesty, mutual respect, and shared dreams. Or at least that's what I thought. I never expected that a simple trip could unravel everything we had carefully constructed over the years. It started with her announcement one morning over breakfast. "I'm taking a short trip next week," she said, stirring her coffee casually. "Just a few days, some friends from work. A little getaway." I didn't suspect anything at first. It seemed harmless work friends, a short escape, a few days apart. I smiled, even offered to help her pack. "Have fun, relax, you deserve it," I said, genuinely believing she would. She smiled back, that warm, confident smile I had always trusted, and left the house a week later with her luggage in tow. The first day was uneventful. I went about my routine, tending to the house, catching up on work, and occasionally texting her to ask about her trip. Her replies were brief but friendly, nothing alarming. By the second day, I noticed something odd. Her responses started to take longer, and her tone changed, slightly less casual, more secretive. I shrugged it off, telling myself that maybe she was busy with her friends or tired from travel. By the third day, unease had settled in my chest. I decided to give her a call, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but only received delayed, vague replies. It was unlike her. I tried to remain calm, thinking logically. Perhaps the hotel had bad service. Perhaps she was caught up in sightseeing. Still, something in me told me that all was not as it seemed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every interaction, every word, every glance from the past few months. Subtle signs I had ignored suddenly became glaringly obvious: her sudden trips for work dinners, mysterious calls that she quickly ended, her insistence on privacy over her phone. A knot of suspicion tightened in my stomach. I decided that the time for passive waiting was over. I needed answers. I started digging quietly. I checked her social media, traced locations, and contacted mutual friends subtly, pretending to ask about general matters. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon something I wish I hadn't: pictures of her in places she never mentioned visiting, smiling alongside someone whose identity she had never shared. Messages from this person were frequent, flirtatious, and undeniably intimate. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Sana had been lying. She was not on a harmless trip with friends. She was having an affair. Anger surged through me, but I kept it under control. I didn't want a confrontation, not yet. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the emptiness of betrayal in a way that couldn't be brushed off with excuses or apologies. And that's when an idea began to form. A plan that would ensure she truly grasped the consequences of vanishing from my life so casually. I decided to leave. Not out of panic, not out of despair, but as a statement. I wouldn't confront her with shouting or blame. I would make her absence feel as sharp and sudden as her own betrayal. I packed my essentials quietly, leaving a note on the kitchen counter, brief but pointed. I've always believed in trust, loyalty, and honesty. I realize now that these are things I cannot take for granted. I've left, not out of anger, but to give you a moment to reflect on your choices. Don't look for me. I need to find a place where truth matters more than deceit. And then I left. The next 2 days were a blur of motion. I stayed in a small rented apartment across town, keeping a low profile, observing from a distance, and letting the reality of her absence settle in. I watched her messages online, saw the sudden panic when she realized she couldn't reach me. The texts started coming in. "Where are you? Please answer me." This isn't funny. But I ignored them. I didn't respond. Not a single word. When she returned from her trip, the house was empty. Her luggage was still in the corner, as if frozen in time, but there was no sign of me. She walked through the rooms, calling my name, her voice shifting from concern to frustration to desperation. The sight of her standing alone in our empty home, realization dawning on her face, was worth every moment of my calculated patience. She tried everything: calls, texts, messages through friends. She even came to the apartment I had rented, only to find that I had anticipated this and moved again. Each failed attempt, each unanswered message added to her shock, leaving her speechless in a way that I had never imagined. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about reflection, about giving her a taste of the emptiness her actions had created. Days passed. She left voicemails, apologies, and desperate pleas. And finally, when she realized that I wasn't returning, that the person she had taken for granted was gone, the weight of her betrayal became undeniable. Her confident smile had vanished, replaced by shame, guilt, and an awareness of the consequences she could not reverse. In the solitude of my temporary refuge, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not because I wanted revenge for the sake of vindictiveness, but because I had reclaimed control over a situation that had been stolen from me. I had given myself space to heal, to think, and to understand the kind of life I wanted, one built on honesty, not secrets. Sana eventually reached out, her messages more reflective than demanding. She asked if we could talk, but I realized that the decision was no longer just about conversation. It was about trust, about respect, and about whether the foundation of our marriage could survive the crack that had formed. Weeks later, I returned home not because everything was forgiven, but because I wanted clarity. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence heavier than any words could be. She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and fear, realizing that her choices had driven a wedge too large to ignore. "I understand why you left," she whispered, voice trembling. I didn't think. "I know," I said quietly, "and I need time. Time to see if trust can be rebuilt, or if this was the end. But I won't live in a home where betrayal goes unnoticed." Not anymore. The lesson was clear for both of us. Betrayal leaves scars not just on those who are wronged, but also on the relationships we thought were uncheckable. Trust, once broken, cannot simply be repaired with apologies. It must be rebuilt piece by piece, and only with full honesty. In the end, her secret trip and my sudden disappearance became a turning point. It was painful, devastating even, but it revealed truths we could no longer ignore. And while the future of our marriage remained uncertain, one thing was clear: respect and honesty are not optional. They are the lifeblood of any relationship, and without them, even the strongest bonds can vanish, leaving only silence and the echo of choices made. That day, when she finally faced an empty home and realized I was gone, I knew she understood the gravity of her actions. Her speechlessness wasn't just surprise, it was the awakening to the consequences of betrayal. And for me, it was the first step toward reclaiming my own peace and self-respect.